Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at a fascinating social phenomenon that is incredibly common, yet rarely understood at a deep psychological level. We're going to be exploring the dramatic rise and fall of the traditional market. But more importantly, we're looking at the hidden trap of success that actually led to its decline. This isn't just your standard economics lesson. It's a profound look into human nature, genuine connection, and how we often, completely unawarely, sabotage our own good fortune. Now, think about the traditional markets in your city, or maybe the ones from your childhood. Historically, these were the absolute center of community life, the whole shebang. Yet, as our source material points out, while older generations might still visit these traditional markets, the younger generation largely avoids them. So, why is that? What actually caused this massive demographic shift? It's kind of this nostalgic mystery. Did we all just suddenly decide we prefer fluorescent lights and squeaky shopping carts? Or did something fundamental break in the relationship between the market and the people? Well, to understand the fall, we first really need to understand what the market truly was at its absolute peak. Which brings us to part 1, the market's hidden energy. This completely redefines how we view commerce. For decades, people thought the main purpose of going to the market was strictly transactional, right? You go, you buy some bean sprouts for dinner, and you go home. Boom. Done. But the actual reason people flocked to these spaces? It was deeply psychological. The market functioned as a massive communal healing space. People went there when they were feeling stressed, oppressed by the daily grind, or just feeling a bit depleted. They literally went there just to talk, exchange a few words, laugh, and let off some steam. It was truly about healing through human connection. You'd walk through those bustling, chaotic aisles, have a lively chat with the merchants, and by the time you walked back home, that heavy stress, poof, it was gone. The source describes this beautifully, noting that people would leave the market with their depleted energy completely filled back up. Honestly, if the market hadn't existed, many of these people might have been bedridden from the sheer stress of life. Instead, they went to the market to recover. It was an essential social battery charger. But that brings us to part 2, the trap of success.
Now, what's really interesting here is how that very healing dynamic we just talked about created unprecedented wealth. We can trace the rather tragic timeline of these traditional merchants. In the beginning, the small and sweet phase, they were incredibly humble. When a customer came by, the merchants would just melt with kindness, throwing in a little extra produce, chatting warmly, and because of this warmth, their businesses grew. This led to phase 2, massive crowds. People started absolutely pouring in. Business boomed. But then, tragically, phase 3 hit. As they got rich and the crowds became overwhelming, arrogance and greed started to set in. They actually started treating the very customers who built their wealth as annoyances.
To really grasp how arrogant they became, you have to understand just how wildly successful they were. The wealth they accumulated was absolute chaos. The source notes that in those boom times, merchants literally didn't even have the time to count their cash. Can you imagine that? Being so busy you're just chucking dollar bills into tin cans and empty wooden crates. They had zero time to organize it. They were just shoving money into whatever container was nearby, eventually stuffing cash into massive grain sacks just to lug it to the bank. They became incredibly wealthy because people were just pouring into the markets. And why were the people pouring in? Because of what the source calls big energy. The original market mothers and merchants possessed this immense, undeniable natural charisma. They weren't just selling you fabrics or vegetables. They were acting as counselors, community leaders, and these huge, magnetic, energetic presences. Customers flocked to them specifically because they had the energy to absorb people's stress and give back vitality. People didn't just come for the goods, They came for the merchants themselves.
But wow, did that immense success become a trap? Once the money was flowing into those wooden crates, the merchants lost their foundational humility. They started looking down on the customers. If a customer just tried to inspect some fish or vegetables, the merchants would snap, yelling things like, "Don't touch the fresh produce if you aren't going to buy it." They became so irritated. Without even realizing it, by becoming greedy and treating their customers poorly, they were literally kicking away the very blessings and energy that had made them successful in the first place.
And that leads right into part 3, the rise of the megamarts.
Let's see how this builds, because the consequences of this arrogance turn into this almost Shakespearean irony. Step 1. The traditional merchants took all that cash stuffed in sacks and used it to give their kids top-tier, expensive educations. Step 2. Those highly educated children grew up and joined massive corporate conglomerates. Step 3. Those exact same children, now working for big corporations, use their fancy education to design the modern megamarts. That's right, the giant supermarkets that eventually replaced the traditional markets were literally designed by the children of the traditional merchants, funded by the very wealth the market generated. Wild, right?
This brings us to an incredibly powerful quote from the source material. If they had kept their warm connection, not even a Soviet rocket could have destroyed the traditional market. The source makes it crystal clear. The market was not destroyed by corporate efficiency or better prices. No way. It was destroyed by the loss of jeong, that uniquely Korean concept of sticky, warm, human connection and affection. If the merchants had just maintained their genuine care for the people coming to them, the traditional market would have been virtually indestructible. Today, we see tons of attempts to revive these markets by adding physical roofs to keep the rain out or by paving the walkways. But as the source explains, weatherproofing isn't the cure. You can modernize the physical space all you want, but if the underlying mindset of the merchants is still broken, if they're still just trying to extract money rather than provide a healing connection, the customers are never coming back. Period. Which leads to our final section, a shift in mindset.
So, the crucial point is how this takes our explainer from a fascinating economic history lesson into a profound philosophical life lesson. How do we actually fix this? Not just in markets, but in life. We have to look at the fundamental shift required. The old mindset that caused the decline was purely self-serving. Give me, help me, buy from me. It was 100% focused on making money. The required mindset for the future completely flips this on its head. It asks, what have I done for you? It shifts the focus entirely from making a quick buck to genuinely serving the customer and the community.
The solution is actually quite simple, though, not always easy to execute. Treat every single customer like family. If merchants return to genuine warmth, if they use dialogue to thaw frozen hearts and rebuild those lost connections, the people will absolutely return. When someone visits, you don't just see a walking wallet. You see a person, a family member, who might literally be carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, and you welcome them warmly. But the source material brilliantly expands this lesson far beyond the aisles of a market. It applies to all of us. We have to stop endlessly demanding things from above. Stop constantly asking God or your ancestors or the universe for help and blessings if you aren't putting in any actual effort for others. If you just keep asking for more without serving anyone else, eventually, you're going to face hardship. We really need to take a step back and reflect on our own faults, our own greed, and our own daily irritations. Ultimately, it comes down to that age-old truth. Heaven helps those who help themselves. But in this context, helping yourself really means self-correction. It means actively working to reduce your own selfishness and irritation. It means realizing that true fortune, a joyful life, and yes, even business success, are just natural byproducts of how well you treat the people who walk into your life. Which leaves us with this final, powerful thought to reflect on today. Before you ask the universe for good fortune, before you ask for success or wealth, you really have to ask yourself one simple question. What am I doing for others? Are you offering big energy and warmth, or are you just yelling, "Don't touch the fresh produce"? The answer to that might just dictate the trajectory of your entire life. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope it sparked some great ideas for you. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.